I stood in front of William and Sophia's luxurious mansion, my steps faltering. Christmas lights covered the entire facade, and the tree inside the window glowed brightly. Laughter and chatter drifted out, elegant and distant. I pulled my old sweater closer around my neck, my hand instinctively smoothing the worn fabric, reminding myself to appear calm even though I knew I would never belong in this place. The door opened. William, in his tailored suit, stood hand in hand with Sophia, the two of them radiating like a flawless couple. My son's eyes flicked over me, briefly embarrassed, before quickly looking away. A sharp pang hit my chest, but I still stepped inside, whispering to myself, no matter what, I'm still his mother. The party smelled of wine, baked goods, and music. Guests discussed money, investments, business. I sat quietly in a corner, forcing polite smiles. No one paid attention. I was just an old shadow in this extravagant world. When it was time for gifts, Sophia stepped into the center of the room, her voice ringing out with pride. This special gift is for my parents for always supporting us. The room erupted in applause as her parents received the lavish present, a luxury watch and an expensive European vacation. Admiring eyes turned toward Sophia and William, and congratulations filled the air. I sat frozen, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, my heart pounding like a drum. Amid all the cheerful noise, not a single person mentioned me. Not a word of thanks. Not even a simple gift, or a phrase as small as, "Thank you, Mom." One curious guest asked. "What about William's mother? Doesn't she get a gift?" Sophia gave a slight smile, her lips curving with practiced ease. "Oh, my mother-in-law isn't really into these occasions. She's a little difficult." The whole room burst into laughter, sharp as knives slicing through the already cold air around me. Heat rushed to my face, burning. Difficult? Or is it just because I have no money, no status? I screamed in my head, but outwardly I held myself together. William stood right there, only managing an awkward smile. No protest. No defense. My son, the boy I raised with every penny saved, with cracked hands and sleepless nights, just watched in silence as I was mocked, letting the humiliation crush me alone. In that moment, it felt like someone had driven a blade straight into my heart. I lowered my gaze, my trembling hand brushing against the handbag beside me. Inside, the cold envelope of documents lay waiting, like a silent reminder. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. The Christmas gift I had brought today wasn't what they expected, but it was one they would never forget. I sipped some water, the bitterness sliding down my throat. Around me, laughter and clinking glasses still rang out, the Christmas tree still twinkled with lights. But inside, a storm churned violently. I remembered the years of hardship, the sacrifices no one ever acknowledged. I remembered giving William my coat in the freezing Boston winters, while I shivered in my threadbare sweater. I remembered the nights I slumped over accounting textbooks, eyes burning with exhaustion, determined to secure him a future. And now, all I received in return was denial, disdain, and cruel laughter. A lifetime of giving, and all I get back is humiliation, I whispered to myself, the bitterness rising in my chest. My hand tightened around the handbag. In my mind, another voice cut through, cold, resolute. If this is how they treat me, then I'll show them I am not invisible. I sat silently at that Christmas party, but my mind drifted back to the past. Back then, after my husband died, it was just me and my child. William's wide eyes couldn't yet comprehend loss, while I had to learn how to stay standing through the storm. I did any job that would bring money to the table. By day, I scrubbed office floors until my hands burned from cleaning chemicals. At night, I babysat for neighbors, rocking their children to sleep while worrying whether mine was dozing off over his homework. Boston winters cut through flesh. My only coat was worn, but I gave it to William. I walked home shivering in a threadbare sweater, the wind stinging my face like needles. I remember one night when my fingers were too numb to turn the key. I stood outside, shaking, sobbing in the dark. Yet the moment I heard my boy call, "Mom," from inside, strength filled me again. Every night after William fell asleep, I opened my accounting books. My eyes burned, the words blurring through tears, but I pressed on. I believed that if I could gain more knowledge, I would find a stable job, give him a steadier home. Each time I collapsed on the table, I whispered to myself, as long as he can study properly, as long as he has a better future, every sacrifice is worth it. But to others, those jobs were worthless. And to William and Sophia now, perhaps those struggles were nothing but embarrassing remnants of the past. I remembered clearly Sophia's public jibes, thrown so casually in front of others. My mother taught me about stock investments, while William's mom, well, she just clipped supermarket coupons. The words floated lightly, but they struck my heart like heavy stones. I pressed my lips together, swallowing the sting. Another time, Sophia beamed sweetly at her friends and added, "My parents gave us the capital to start our business, but William's mom, she didn't really help. Just another burden." I remembered sitting there, hiding my hands in my lap, my nails digging into my skin to keep myself from reacting. I wanted to shout that I had mortgaged my small house to give William the money for his first business venture. But I stayed silent, knowing words would change nothing. No one in that room was truly listening to me. Each comparison, repeated again and again, was like a dull knife scraping at my heart, not enough to spill blood, but enough to make me bleed inside. I kept asking myself, so, is every penny I saved, every ounce of sweat and every tear I shed to raise him worth nothing in their eyes? Am I only a source of shame? I remembered a winter morning, riding the bus to my cleaning job, my hands shaking from the cold. Next to me sat businessmen in thick coats, the faint scent of cologne surrounding them. I felt small, apart from their world. But I comforted myself, it's okay, as long as my son never has to sit here, as long as he can hold his head high in their world. And yet now, when he had truly entered that glamorous world, he turned his back on the very person who built the bridge for him to cross. At today's party, I sat and watched William laugh and chat with Sophia and their wealthy friends, and suddenly I realized, all of my sacrifices had never been remembered by them. To Sophia, I was nothing more than a rustic, clumsy old woman, out of place in this high-class world. To William, my son, I was only a source of shame he wanted to hide. I sipped my drink, the bitterness seeping deep into my gut. Inside me, a dry whisper rose. Was I wrong to believe that maternal love could bridge every distance? Maybe, in my son's eyes, I am nothing more than a shadow of a poor past. I closed my eyes and let the memories flood back, like an old film replaying my life. I saw myself younger, holding a mop, sweat dripping onto the cold tile floor. I saw myself bent over books under a dim yellow light, eyes ringed with fatigue. I saw a small child dozing off with a textbook in his arms, while I pulled a thin blanket over him and smiled quietly. I once believed all those hardships would become my son's pride. But now, in this dazzling room, all I could hear was mocking laughter, cutting comparisons, and William's frightening silence. And in that moment, one truth struck me: every sacrifice only holds value when someone chooses to remember it. When they decide to forget, everything turns to ashes. I still remember the day William graduated from college. On stage, my son wore the gown and mortarboard, his eyes shining with pride. I sat in the back rows, my heart swelling, tears streaming uncontrollably. All the years of drudgery, all the long nights collapsed over a desk, all the shivering mornings in a worn-out sweater, everything condensed into that moment. I believed then that my life's efforts had finally been rewarded. I believed William would understand, would remember, would know that behind that diploma lay his mother's blood and tears. William quickly opened his construction company. In the early days, I remember him stopping by often, telling me about each small contract, each new project breaking ground. I always listened, eyes glowing, feeling joy as if I were reliving youth myself. I once wept with happiness when he said, "Mom, my company is finally turning a profit." I thought at last, my sacrifices had borne fruit. But then Sophia appeared. Beautiful, wealthy, eloquent Sophia. William was smitten from the first moment, and I knew my life would change from then on. Their wedding was more lavish than anything I had ever seen. The banquet hall blazed with lights, the guests all businessmen and politicians. I was seated at a side table, squeezed in with distant relatives. In the official family photo, my name wasn't even called. I sat in the corner, swallowing tears, telling myself, as long as my son is happy, no seat matters. But that wound never healed. Later, at every important event, Sophia never failed to praise her parents. I still remember her raising a glass at the company's expansion celebration, her voice brimming with pride. Thanks to my parents' support, the company has grown so strong. The guests applauded, William just smiled and nodded, never once mentioning me. I didn't need him to list my sacrifices before everyone, but even one acknowledgement would have warmed my heart. But there was nothing. I began to see clearly, in William's eyes, I had become a faint shadow, a name unworthy of mention. The distance between us grew, not only because of Sophia but also because of William himself. Once he entered the wealthy world, he seemed embarrassed by me. Every time I stopped by his office, I caught that flicker of avoidance in his eyes when his employees noticed me. Dressed in my faded sweater, carrying a paper bag of homemade pastries, I saw his gaze soften for a moment, then quickly mask itself with a polite smile. Mom, next time you don't need to come by the office, it's not convenient here. Not convenient? I asked, my heart tightening. But William only muttered awkwardly. I'm too busy, I don't have time for visitors. Visitors. In my son's world, I had become a visitor. I remember once William brought me along to a dinner with business partners. I was nervous, trying my best to dress neatly, but the moment we walked in, I heard the whispers. Is that his mother? She doesn't really fit in here, does she? William heard it too. His face stiffened, then he gently pulled me aside and whispered. Mom, don't come next time. I don't want people to misunderstand. I understood. Misunderstand meant my son feared people would see his true origins, a mother who was poor and rustic, and that would tarnish his worth. I began to feel it sharply, the love that once bound us had turned into a social divide. William was no longer proud of me, he was ashamed. Every glance, every word was a silent pair of scissors cutting the cord between mother and child. At night, I lay alone on my bed, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy as stone. I asked myself, was I wrong to pour my entire life into one child? Did I raise a man who now wants to deny his roots? Each morning, I trudged to the market with my meager pension, carrying cheap vegetables, passing the gleaming towers where my son's company resided. I would look up at them and see a world that no longer had room for me. A world where William belonged, and I was just a lonely shadow outside. And then it hit me, my son had crossed to another shore, one filled with light but frozen cold, a shore where I did not exist. The distance between William and me did not only show itself in the glitter of banquets, but seeped cruelly into everyday life. Each day, I felt more of my dignity sliced away. Once, I scraped together enough money to buy my granddaughter a doll. It wasn't imported or expensive, just a simple toy from the modest shop near my home. I wrapped it carefully, tied a red ribbon, my heart fluttering with joy as I imagined her face when she opened it. But when I handed over the gift, Sophia glanced at it, her lips curling. Cheap stuff, she won't like it. William stayed silent, not a word of defense. I sat there, still clutching the gift box in my hands, as if trying to shield the small fragment of affection I carried from being cast aside. I knew that once I left, that gift would likely be tossed in a corner or worse, dropped into the trash. My heart tightened, as though I myself had been discarded. Another time, I went to the supermarket with Sophia. I wore my old sweater, its collar frayed. As we stood at the checkout counter, Sophia spoke just loudly enough for others to hear. You really should dress more properly. Looking like this, you could be mistaken for a maid. My cheeks burned hot. I tugged at the hem of my sweater, shrinking under the curious stares around me. I wanted to retort, to say that this sweater had carried me through countless bitter winters, had kept me warm during the grueling days I worked myself to the bone to support the very husband she married. But the words stuck in my throat, leaving me only with humiliating silence. I remember clearly my granddaughter's birthday. I hadn't been invited. That day, I stood outside the gate, holding a small gift, listening to the music and laughter spilling out from inside. I wanted to knock, but my limbs were frozen. In that brightly lit house, there was no place for me. I stood there for a long time before finally turning away, walking into the cold wind, my tears blurring the path ahead. At family gatherings, Sophia often smiled at the guests and said, "My mother-in-law is already old, not really suited for these elegant parties. I hope you'll understand." The words were gentle, but they landed like a slap across my face. I bowed my head, pretending to nod along, while my insides twisted in pain. What hurt me wasn't Sophia's remark, but William's silence beside her. My son, instead of defending his mother, chose the silence of agreement. There was a time when William said to me outright, "Mom, you should go out less. I don't want you to embarrass the kids." His words stunned me. Embarrass the kids just because I wasn't glamorous, just because I didn't belong in their world. I felt as though my whole being shattered, as if part of my soul had been erased. Day by day, I felt pieces of my dignity stripped away, bit by bit. I no longer dared to appear much in their lives. I was afraid of judgmental eyes, of mocking words, of my son's silence. I withdrew into my small house, retreating within four walls. Yet even there, the pain clung to me. At night, I often sat silently in front of the old mirror. A weary face stared back at me, tired eyes and roughened hands. I saw a woman who had sacrificed her whole life, yet was left only with loneliness. I asked myself, do I really exist? Or am I just an unnecessary shadow in my own son's family? There were nights I couldn't sleep, only listening to the ticking of the clock. I remembered when William was little, how he would run into my arms after school, proudly waving a perfect test score. Back then, I believed that the bond between mother and child was the strongest cord in the world, unbreakable. But now, that cord was frayed and torn, ripped further each day by invisible knives. I knew I no longer had the strength to hope for change from them. Yet deep inside, I could never stop loving my son. Even as he turned his back on me, even as he dismissed me, a mother's heart still ached at the thought of him. Perhaps that was what made the pain even deeper. I grew used to sitting quietly at family gatherings. No one expected me to contribute to the conversation anymore, no one truly cared what I thought. And the person chosen as the sharpest point of comparison was always me. Each time Sophia's family arrived, the room seemed to glow. Her parents always dressed in elegance, speaking with confidence about overseas trips or million-dollar investments. Guests buzzed with admiration, their eyes sparkling with envy. I sat in the shadows, my faded coat making me stand out in my awkwardness. I remember one evening, as glasses of wine were lifted, a guest said loudly, "I truly admire Sophia's parents, they have both money and vision. Without them, William wouldn't be where he is today." Applause and praise filled the room. William only gave a faint smile, raising his glass in agreement. Yes, my company could only grow thanks to my in-laws' constant support. The word struck me like a hammer blow to the chest. All the years I had struggled to raise him, every penny I saved for his schooling, every sleepless night I endured wiped away with one casual sentence. I kept my face composed, but inside, my heart shattered. Another time, at a party celebrating my grandson's graduation, Sophia's father stood up, his voice booming. "My grandson received an excellent education and has such a bright future, all thanks to the nurturing of our whole family." Everyone nodded in agreement, applauding. I sat still, my hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my skin until it bled and no one noticed. In that moment, I felt completely erased from the family portrait, as though I had never existed. Even my granddaughter, the child I loved unconditionally, unknowingly cut me with her words. That day, she boasted to her friend. My grandparents took me to Disneyland, and my grandma, she just tells stories about being poor back in the day. Children's laughter rang out, pure and carefree, but to me it was like the slice of a sharp knife. I had once tried to bring up the fact that I mortgaged my small home so William could start his first business. But William brushed it aside immediately. "Mom, stop living in the past." Sophia chimed in, her voice sweet but dripping with mockery. "Everyone wants to focus on the future. Talking about poverty all the time just drags things down." I stayed silent. I understood that to them, my past was a stain, something to be hidden, not the foundation of everything they now had. Outside, the world believed William's success came from his wife's family. I wanted to shout that the truth wasn't so simple, that I had given up my youth and health so he could study and build a future. But I knew no one wanted to hear it. The story of a poor mother raising a successful son wasn't as appealing as a son-in-law lifted up by his wealthy in-laws. I slowly came to understand, in everyone's eyes, I was nothing more than a provincial woman with no value beyond a past of hardship. All the admiration, the praise, the accolades, they flowed only to Sophia's family. And me? I was only mentioned when they needed a target for ridicule, a point of cruel comparison. That pain was not only denial, it was rejection. Rejection that I had ever existed in William's journey. Rejection that all my sacrifices had ever mattered. Rejection that I had once been the foundation that allowed my son to stand tall today. Each time I left those gatherings, I walked slowly through the cold wind, my heart heavy. My shadow stretched long across the sidewalk, lonely and faint, just like my place in the family. I asked myself, have I truly become an outsider? Has my son already wished to erase me, to rewrite a new success story, a story without his mother? I used to think that my greatest pain was just the denial, the bitter comparisons between the poor maternal side and the wealthy in-laws. But in fact, that was only the surface. The real stab came one winter evening, when William and Sophia unexpectedly showed up at my small house. That day, I had just finished brewing a pot of tea, the steam rising faintly in the cold kitchen. As the door opened, William walked in with a heavy face, Sophia following behind, her eyes red as if she had just cried. I froze, not even having time to ask before William sighed, his voice weighed down. "Mom, my company is in serious trouble. If I can't raise funds quickly, it could go bankrupt." My heart skipped a beat. I hurriedly set down the teacup, my hand trembling. "Bankrupt? How could that be? You always said the company was growing." Sophia cut in, her voice choked. "It's really bad, Mom. We've tried everything, but now, if we don't get urgent capital, it's over. Please, Mom, help us." I panicked, worry flooding me. Hearing my son's voice, seeing that fragile look on his face, my heart ached. I asked quickly. "Then, what can I do to help you now?" William hesitated for a long moment, then looked straight at me, his eyes moist. "Mom, mortgage this house. And your retirement savings too. I need them immediately to keep the company afloat. I promise, once we get through this, we'll pay it all back." Those words struck like lightning. I was stunned, my hands shaking so badly I nearly spilled the tea. This house, it was where my husband and I had built our life, where I cradled my son through his childhood, where every memory was stored. And the retirement savings, that was what I had set aside, so that when I grew weak, I would not be a burden to William himself. Yet now, all of it was being targeted. Sophia took my hand, tears brimming in her eyes. "Mom, we have no one else. If you love us, this is the time to prove it. We swear we'll return it, just trust us this once." I looked at William. He nodded, but his eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. A chill ran down my spine. If it were truly an unexpected crisis, why couldn't my son look his mother in the eye? My voice broke. Is it really that desperate? Are you sure there's no other way? William lowered his head, silent. I looked at the two people before me, my son and his wife, and my heart was torn apart. I had given my entire life for William. Did I have the strength to sacrifice again? But this time, the price was no longer loose change or the years of my youth. It was everything I had left, my home and the peaceful life of my final years. That night, after they left, I sat motionless before the table, the tea long gone cold. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window panes. I looked around the old house, the walls, the pictures, every corner flooded me with memories. Each one seemed to beg, "Don't lose this place." But then William's voice echoed in my head, "If you love me, prove it." I tossed and turned all night, staring blankly at the ceiling. Tears streamed endlessly. I felt trapped at a crossroads with no way out, on one side, a mother's love, on the other, my own survival. I feared that if I refused, William would see me as cold and selfish. But if I agreed, I would lose everything and maybe never get it back. Near dawn, I finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. In my dream, my late husband appeared, his eyes sorrowful, shaking his head. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The sky outside was gray, just like my soul. The next day, I still could not bring myself to decide. I wandered through the park, watching children play, hearing their bright laughter. Suddenly, I remembered William as a little boy, the child who once clung tightly to me, who once promised, "I'll take care of you when you're old, Mom." The memory brought fresh tears down my cheeks. I asked myself, now, does my son see me only as a walking wallet? And if that's true, is a mother's love still strong enough to save this, or am I just stepping into a trap laid out for me? A few days after that evening, while I was still drowning in tangled thoughts, the phone rang. A relative from my husband's side spoke hesitantly. "Scarlett. Anna has passed away. She left a will, and your name is in it. The apartment, the land in Maine, and a large bank account, all belong to you." I was stunned, my ears buzzing. My sister, the strong woman who had lived alone her whole life, was gone, leaving behind a fortune I had never dared to imagine. I broke down in tears, both for the loss and for the strange feeling that an unseen hand had pulled me back from the edge of despair. In that moment, my first thought was William. I can save my son. I can help him escape bankruptcy. I whispered, my trembling hand pressed against my chest. A mother's heart once again urged me to give everything I had to my child, just as I always had. I decided I would bring him the good news the next morning. The next day, I went to William's house. The grand mansion glowed with lights, the faint scent of perfume in the air. I was about to ring the bell when I heard voices drifting from the slightly open kitchen door. I froze, and then, those words pierced my heart like blades. William's voice, light but certain. "Of course Mom will hand over the money. She always gives in." Sophia's mocking laugh followed. "Yeah, just pretend it's a crisis. Add in that inheritance, and we'll drain it all. She spent her whole life sacrificing. At her age, what's left to hold on to?" I was shattered. My whole body shook, my back pressed hard against the cold wall to keep from collapsing. My ears rang, each word driving in like nails. I could not believe it that my son, the boy I raised with my own blood and tears, was plotting to squeeze every last cent out of me, even the inheritance I hadn't even spoken of. In my head, a scream echoed, my own son, calculating every penny from his mother's blood. I pressed my hand against my mouth, struggling to stifle a sob. I wanted to rush in, to ask outright, "Am I nothing more than a wallet to you?" But my limbs went numb, my throat locked tight. I turned away, walking like a ghost. The night outside was thick, the cold wind slapping my face, yet I felt nothing. Inside me there was only a vast emptiness, as if someone had scraped away every last shred of faith I had left. When I reached home, I collapsed onto the floor and buried my face in my hands, sobbing. This pain was even worse than the humiliation I had endured at those parties. Because this time, it wasn't just disregard, it was betrayal in its purest form. Every sacrifice I had made had turned to ashes. I once believed that if I loved enough, my son would understand. But no, he had chosen to trample my heart to keep moving forward. I looked up at my husband's photo on the altar. His stern face, his solemn eyes seemed to ask, "How much longer will you endure this?" I cried out, "Darling, our son has betrayed us. He's no longer the little boy you left in my care." Through my sobs, a strange flame began to rise within me. It burned with pain, but also with clarity and strength. If I stay silent any longer, they'll drain away even my soul. I can't allow myself to become a breathing corpse, bled dry of every last drop. I wiped my tears and forced myself to stand. At the table, I opened a drawer and pulled out an old folder, the phone number of the lawyer I had once kept. I drew a deep breath, then dialed. On the other end, a calm male voice answered. "Scarlett, it's been a long time. What do you need me to do?" I recounted everything, every word I had overheard, every humiliation I had endured. He was silent for a long while before advising. "Stay calm. Don't confront them yet. You'll need proof. And you'll need to choose the right time." I nodded, my breath gradually steadying. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like just a victim. A part of me, long buried beneath blind sacrifice, was awakening. That night, I cried until I was drained. When the tears finally dried, only emptiness remained, filling the whole room. I sat motionless under the dim yellow light, my shoulders trembling, feeling as though my heart had been ripped out, thrown to the ground, and crushed. Everything I had once trusted, motherly love, sacrifice, gratitude, had been trampled mercilessly by William and Sophia. I turned again to my husband's photo. His eyes were still stern, solemn. I whispered, "Darling, our son is no longer the boy he once was. He has betrayed me. He sees me only as a wallet, an endless source of money to exploit. I've shut my eyes and endured for so many years, but this time, I cannot go on." Inside me, the pain slowly transformed into a fire of fury. It burned bright, sweeping away the last traces of weakness. I realized, if I kept silent, they would not only strip away my money, my house, but also my soul, my very life. I would be emptied, turned into a walking corpse with nothing left to cling to. I told myself, enough. I must rise. The next morning, I went to my old lawyer's office. He listened intently, his gaze both serious and sympathetic. When I trembled through the details of what I had overheard the night before, he nodded. "You'll need evidence. Only hard proof will make people believe you. Without it, they'll deny everything." I clenched my hands and replied softly, "I will. I'll gather every piece." From that day on, I lived differently. I was no longer the weak mother, crying alone in the night. I began preparing quietly. I bought a small recorder and kept it in my handbag at all times. Whenever William or Sophia called, I turned it on, saving every word. I requested bank statements, collected every document tied to the inheritance Anna had left. I organized them all carefully into a file, hidden safely away. At first, my hands trembled when I held the recorder. I felt guilty, as though I were betraying my son. But each time I remembered the words, "Just pretend a crisis to squeeze her dry," my resolve hardened. I repeated to myself, "I am not the one betraying them, they betrayed me first." In the evenings, I sat before the mirror, practicing aloud. I stared into my own eyes and rasped the words. "I am not a shadow. I am not invisible. I am clear-minded enough to protect myself." At first, the words sounded awkward, but gradually I felt stronger. In the crow's feet etched at the corners of my eyes, I began to see a hardened light, returning after so long. I decided to rewrite my will. My hand shook on the paper, but line by line, I struck out William and Sophia's names. Most of my assets, I left to a scholarship fund for poor children. Only a small portion I reserved for my granddaughter, the child still innocent, still untouched by her parents' deceit. I thought to myself, if one day she seeks me out, let her come on her own 2 feet. Some nights, I imagined myself standing in that same opulent room where I had endured so much humiliation. I pictured the astonishment on the guests' faces when they heard the truth, the shock in William's eyes, the pallor of Sophia's face. The thought did not give me satisfaction, it simply gave me strength. Because I knew, if appearances meant so much to them, then appearances would be the very blade that cut through their ambition. From the moment I chose to fight back, I no longer cried endlessly. My grief condensed into a cold current running through my veins, feeding my clarity. I began to care for myself again, something I had long forgotten. I bought a new dress, not too expensive, but fitting and elegant. I went to the hair salon, asking for a simple trim. When the young stylist smiled and said, "You have a kind face, and with this cut you look much brighter," I was startled to realize, how long had it been since anyone complimented me? I smiled faintly, but inside, the fire of determination roared. I knew I had changed. I was no longer the mother who bowed her head, trembling under their scorn. I was becoming a fighter, the last fighter of my life. I gathered the file, arranging it neatly. Every page, every recording was a weapon. I gently stroked the cover and whispered, "This time, I will expose the truth. No one will be able to deny it anymore." Christmas Eve was approaching. I no longer saw myself as the trembling old woman in the corner of the room. I felt like a small but steadfast lamp, ready to shine on the darkness of so many years. And inside me, a vow rang out clearly. This will be a Christmas they will never forget. Not because of my humiliation, but because of the truth they must face. Some nights, I sat alone, closing my eyes, imagining the coming Christmas party. The thought didn't make me feel triumphant, only more determined. If they valued appearances above all else, then appearances themselves would be the blade cutting into their ambition. During my preparations, at times my heart still wavered. I would sit staring at the file, tears spilling out, "This is my son. Why do I have to do this to him?" But then I remembered the moment I listened in behind the door. I remembered every cold word, "Just pretend it's a crisis," will drain her dry. Those words burned away every hesitation, reminding me that I had no choice left. This wasn't just a battle for money, it was to protect the last fragments of my soul and dignity. I also thought of my granddaughter. That child was still innocent, unaware of how cruel her parents truly were. But I needed to be stronger. I wasn't destroying, I was only protecting what was right. Back in the present, the moment had come to end everything. I chose a quiet seat, placed my handbag beside me, my hand brushing against the file inside. My heart pounded, but it no longer beat in chaos from fear, it pulsed with determination. Throughout the party, Sophia didn't forget her familiar habit, mockery. Seeing me sit silently, she smirked. "William's mother never helps with anything, thank goodness we managed everything on our own." A few guests forced awkward smiles. I gripped my glass tightly, staying silent. In my mind, I whispered, "Go ahead, laugh. In just a moment, your mouths will fall silent." Near the end of the party, as everyone raised their glasses in a toast, I stood up. The scrape of my chair on the wooden floor rang out sharp and cold, silencing the lively atmosphere at once. I walked toward the center. All eyes turned to me. I drew a deep breath and spoke clearly, firmly. "I have a gift for my son." Murmurs rose, a few people glancing at one another curiously. William frowned, while Sophia gave a thin smile, trying to stay polite. "Mother, now is not the time." I cut her off, opening my handbag and pulling out the file. The light caught the cover, gleaming like the edge of a blade. My voice rang out, steady. "Your company is not on the verge of bankruptcy, as you claimed." Here is the real financial report. And here. I placed a small recorder on the table and pressed play. William's voice filled the room, echoing through every corner. Of course Mom will give us the money. She always gives in. Then Sophia's bitter, cold voice followed. Yeah, just fake a crisis, and with that inheritance too, we'll bleed her dry. She spent her whole life sacrificing. At her age, what's left to hold on to? The room froze. Laughter vanished, replaced by suffocating silence. A few guests gaped, some covered their mouths. Whispers spread through the crowd. They tricked his own mother. Unbelievable. Sophia's face turned pale, her eyes darting around in panic. William went ashen, fists clenched, veins bulging on his forehead. I looked straight at my son, my voice sharp as a blade. You say you love me, but in truth, you only see me as a wallet. I turned toward the others and continued, my sister left me a large inheritance. I was going to give it all to you, as a Christmas gift. But from now on, it will never belong to those who betrayed me. The room erupted in murmurs. Faces that once beamed admiration at William now bore only contempt and cold disdain. The honor he had clung to collapsed before his very eyes. Sophia forced a shaky smile, her voice trembling. Mother, you must be mistaken. We never. I cut her off, laughing bitterly. No, Sophia. I wish this were a mistake. But you yourselves drove the knife into my heart. No one set a trap for you, except your own greed. William stepped forward, his voice breaking. Mom, please stop. We can talk about this privately. I shook my head, my eyes calm. Privately? You've turned my humiliation into a private matter for years. Today, with everyone watching, I finally feel justice. The room was deathly still. I closed the file and put it back into my bag. Then I turned and walked away under their astonished gazes. For the first time in my life, I did not bow my head. My heels struck a steady rhythm on the floor, echoing through the suffocated silence. Behind me, the mansion sank into a stifling quiet. Shocked faces, horrified whispers, stunned stares, I left them all behind. Ahead of me was the night and the falling snow, but inside, I felt light. I had spoken the truth. I had reclaimed my dignity. And for the first time in decades, I walked tall, unafraid. After that Christmas night, everything changed faster than I expected. News spread through Boston's business circles like wildfire. Praise that once surrounded William and Sophia turned into murmurs and scorn. Friends drifted away, partners grew wary. The mansion that once blazed with lights now stood cold, its windows shuttered. I no longer had to do anything, the truth had spoken for itself. I completed the will with the lawyer. The next morning, I went to his office. He handed me the will, sealed and read, his voice firm. It's done, ma'am. From now on, this will is legally binding. You've made it clear exactly who inherits your assets. My eyes trembled over the page, my chest tightening, so, no one can dispute it anymore. He nodded. Correct. And if you want, make it public. Silence only makes people look down on you. I hugged the will tightly to my chest, my heart suddenly light. For the first time, I felt I held in my hands the power to decide everything. That night, the phone rang several times. William called. On the line, his voice was choked, sobbing like a child. Mom, give me one more chance. I didn't mean to trick you. I just wanted to save the company. My heart ached, because no matter what, he was still my son. But I knew the chance had been lost the moment he chose deceit. I answered slowly, my voice calm but firm. Chances don't always remain. I gave everything my whole life, and now I'm keeping what little I have left for myself. You'll have to learn to live with the consequences of your choices. Sophia came as well, crying and screaming at my door. You've destroyed this family. How could you do this to your own son? I looked at her, no longer angry, only pitying. I said, family isn't a place for calculation. Family is a place of love. If you saw me as a tool, then this family was already broken long ago. I closed the door, leaving her cries to fade into the cold wind. In the days that followed, I packed up and left my old house, moving into a small apartment near the park. At first, when I stepped through the new door, my heart felt empty. But only after a few weeks, I realized something: I had never been as free as I was now. Every morning, I walked in the park. I sat on a bench, watching children run and laugh, their voices carried by the wind. I saw William's face as a little boy, running toward me with bright eyes, holding a piece of paper with a perfect grade. That memory warmed me, but it no longer tore me apart. I was learning to love my son by letting go, not by clinging. I joined a community club. I learned to paint, my thin hands holding a brush for the first time, filling spaces with color and light. I practiced piano, the black and white keys stumbling into simple melodies but full of joy. I joined yoga classes, learning to breathe deeply, to release pain from every muscle. I realized, more than half a lifetime had passed, and this was the first time I had done something purely for myself, not for anyone else. One morning, sunlight streamed through the window and lit up my face. I smiled. The breeze carried the faint scent of winter flowers. I closed my eyes, my heart at peace. I had survived the darkest days, touched the depths of pain, and now I was stepping into a new beginning late, but never too late. Sometimes, I still caught the pitying looks of old acquaintances, poor woman, betrayed by her son. But I only smiled. I no longer needed pity or recognition. I knew my worth. I knew I was no longer an invisible shadow, no longer a mother trampled underfoot. I was Scarlett, a woman who stood up, who spoke the truth, who reclaimed her dignity. And most importantly, I was no longer afraid. I wasn't afraid of judgmental eyes. I wasn't afraid of my son's cold silence. I wasn't afraid of parties where people laughed at me. I had learned to walk upright, my head held high even if I was alone. The next Christmas, I was no longer in that grand mansion. I sat in my little apartment, lit a candle on the table, made myself a cup of hot cocoa, and played soft music. I gazed at the flickering flame and whispered to myself, "This is the real Christmas, the Christmas of freedom and peace." The lesson of this story is not only in the pain of a mother betrayed, but also in her awakening: love does not mean blind sacrifice. When kindness becomes an excuse for others to exploit you, it ceases to be love, it becomes chains. Only when you dare to say no, when you dare to let go, do you truly preserve your dignity. Scarlett's Christmas reminds us that the greatest liberation does not come from others, but from the courage to protect our own worth.